No one's texted from it, but, I just keep putting it out there and see what happens. But, no, when I heard, when I heard Biden talk about the whole tribes and all that, I thought Kevin might have some insight on this because I know you wrote about it. So I'm very intrigued to hear what your thoughts are on this.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot going on here. I think there's a lot that relate from the book that I wrote, White Skies by Mingo, to the COVID pandemic today, how it affects the Native Americans, for sure.
And
there's a lot.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you also, do you feel like they were largely ignored during the pandemic, or was there an eye on it that maybe we didn't hear in the media, that type of thing? And you can have some.
Yeah, there's so much that we don't hear in the media. There's so much that the media, reports on that's, partially true, that they just don't report. So there's a lot going on there. I mean, this goes back to the 1800s, even.
Well, let me start. I'm ready. I'm revved up. So let me start this. Here we go.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
In 3, 2, 1.
Here's your host, Alex Garrett.
Well, he's no stranger to Alex Garrett podcasting, and I always love having him on. By the way, you can still text me 206-426-9884. 206-426-9884 is my podcast line, and I'll say a little slower later. But I'm so excited right now because I've got the award-winning author, and I consider a true friend. We've only met basically online, and yet we've grown this friendship. What now, Kevin D. Miller? 3 years, it feels like already. So thanks for coming back.
Absolutely, Alex. Yeah, we're definitely friends, man. We just kind of had a connection here, from the beginning and stuff. And I always love coming on your podcast and talking about, my books. You feel like talking about. I always enjoy the conversation, my friend.
Well, how have you been? I know the pandemic has been tough on everyone, and last time we talked, we actually talked about how insulting it was that that World War II and the war vets were basically looped into this. It's like this is a totally different thing than combat. And then, of course, Biden said the other night. But how have you been personally? It didn't stop your writing or your connections to the community, to the literature community. So talk about writing in a pandemic, firstly.
Yeah, actually, being in the pandemic, it allowed me a lot more time to write, because what else did I have to do? So it actually allowed me to sit my second book, White Skies, Black Mingo, inspired by my great-great-grandmother, who was Native American. She was Ohio Seneca, part of the Haudenosaunee, or better known as Iroquois. And I wrote this book, Alex, in like 3 months, compared to 3 years that it took me to write Heart of Steel, So it affected us. I mean, it's been tough. I mean, we're from Arizona, but we've been living in California because my daughters have been active, as you know, and my youngest daughter just entered high school, and just the online stuff, distance learning, has been really tough on her as well. But hopefully we're coming out of it now. It sounds like we're starting to open up. I know California will be a lot slower behind the other states at getting things opened up, but there's promise. There's light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, I remember last year, this time everyone was more panicking. I think you feel it too. Yeah. We're actually more relieved this year. It's like a year later and we're actually feeling positive, are we not?
Oh, yeah. No, I think everything, I mean, from everything I read and hear and stuff, it sounds like the COVID is about at a 77 or more decrease, that we've got herd immunity, that it's going away. The virus has been weakening for a while. And, not as many people are as sick. Still have the high-risk folks that have to be careful. But I think we're through it. I think we're about to get back to as normal a life as we can.
We are. And as you know, you are a veteran as well. So I know the veteran community has been hit hard with this too, haven't they?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, the vets have taken it hard. Anybody with health issues and medical insurance issues and stuff has hit it hard. As has the Native American community. They've had a pretty rough through this whole pandemic.
And I'm sure you're in touch with them now. Another group that's had, I feel like, an underreported scourge, if you will, and it's been bad in the Native American community. Mm-hmm. And your book touches on, with White Skies, Black Mingo, your book touches on the Native American community suffering from an earlier pandemic, right? Tell us about your newest book.
Absolutely. Yeah, my newest book, White Skies, Black Mingo, it's a historical fiction, but it's inspired by the love of my great-great-grandparents. She was Native American. He was the son of Irish immigrants. My great-great-grandmother was Ohio Seneca, part of the Haudenosaunee Nation, otherwise known as Iroquois. And, this goes back for hundreds of years. I mean, the early Spanish conquerors brought smallpox, to the United States. And, of course, the Native Americans had no immunity to it. So it was lethal to them. And, it was spread through their communities and it just devastated, these people and their population, and then you go back to the Indian Vaccination Act of 1832, and this is a real winner here. This is basically a law that the government created to vaccinate the Native Americans from smallpox because they wanted to get them healthy to a point where they could actually move them, to reservations, to Indian country in Oklahoma, so that the white settlers could then move in and take their land. I mean, it's just a really sad part of our history, that had happened. But relating to the COVID, the casinos closed down, the skywalk at Grand Canyon, that's like so much of their income. And that took a big tax cut to their communities, which their health care is not the best as it is anyway and very slow. So that really created a lot of problems with the Native American population. And they are at much higher risk, Alex, for COVID, than other races of people, because they have a higher rate of diabetes and heart disease and obesity and a lot of taken from their hunting grounds and moved to reservations and their whole life was just turned upside down. So they're more vulnerable to the COVID, and it seems that treatment and supplies and monies and stuff were just too slow to get to help them. So a lot of lives were lost because of the slow reaction. I know they did designate like $8 billion the last CARES Act, to help the Native communities, but so much of it is so slow, in their funding, and their medical care is just lacking, on the reservations. It needs to be looked at. It really does need to be looked at and looked into deeper because, they've gotten the short end of the deal on so many things, the Natives.
Gotcha, Kevin. No, it's and learning about all of this had to open your eyes, right, to the Native American community writing this book?
Yeah, no, it definitely did because there's so much research involved. And I wanted to write this story in the eyes of my great-great-grandmother, and from her perspective and from a Native American, so it took a lot of research to look into that, to truly understand their religion, their culture, their views, their political views, and from their side and their point of view of things. And it's very, very eye-opening. And because I wanted to tell a true story. I wanted to tell a factual story, and research the Civil War. The story takes place in the Civil War era, which, was kind of a forbidden love between my great-great-grandparents because Native Americans and the white settlers were not allowed to even marry legally in those days. So I thought that was a really good idea to write a book around. I'm in a mixed marriage myself. My wife is Hispanic. And so that made for a good story. But, yeah, it's definitely opened my eyes to a lot of things, a lot of different things that need to be taken care of. And I noted, that, the Biden administration had appointed Beth as the first Native American Interior Secretary, which, my politics might not agree with hers, but I applaud, the of Native American as Interior Secretary because the Interior Secretary is in charge of Indian affairs and land management. And to me, that just makes a lot of sense.
I was going to say, because,
very,
the Trump administration actually did help the Native Americans with some policy work. And he went, if you remember, he flew down there to Arizona to talk with them. I mean, that was a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not seeing that with the Biden administration yet, though. Maybe just too early on?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm kind of watching to see how much they actually do, and action-wise, because there's always a lot of talk and stuff. And, yes, President Trump did do a lot for the community he doesn't get credit for, because, once again, the news media, they sometimes, a lot of times, don't report what's actually going on, or they'll eliminate stuff just because they have an agenda, to push out to people. So they eliminate stories that should be reported. So he doesn't get the credit that he deserves in a lot of areas. But the government itself, it failed in a lot of ways in not getting the help to them as quickly, as it really needed to get out to. And there's a lot of isolated, areas and reservations and stuff to get to. But we should have probably had a better plan. And hopefully we'll have a better plan in the future. But yeah, I'm keeping my eye on the Biden administration to see how they handle the community, and they handle any future epidemics or pandemics in the native and the reservations.
Kevin, I can't go without asking this. Is history repeating itself when you hear that girls are literally missing from these reservations? I mean, that's terrifying, but has it happened before in your research?
Oh, I'm say that again, Alex. I missed the part of that. I'm sorry.
Well, it's okay. No, the other factor that was plaguing the Native Americans last year, besides the pandemic, was their women, their girls went missing. They don't know where they went. And so, did you find that was the case in your research way back when as well?
Yeah, no, I did not turn that up in my research. Actually, to be honest with you there. So I don't really know much about it to speak on that. But, that's a pretty fascinating story that we, probably should dive into and, see what turns up there. But no, I did not see that in my research.
Well, your grandfather, Stan Pawlsky, was a hero, and you wrote him as such, and I feel like he was just by his story. Is your great-grandmother a hero as well for what she did for Native Americans?
I believe so. Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of research on her and my great grandfather. There's not as much information there to pull, but I found I integrated into the story. But I have to call the story historical fiction because most of it is fictional, but put in there, and I would say yes, the character in the story is definitely a heroic character. I mean, she starts out as a young 12-year-old. Her mother and grandmother are fleeing a smallpox epidemic in Ohio, and they're headed towards Wheeling, Virginia because it's prior to when West Virginia became a state during the Civil War. But she's tested. She's tested, and her courage and her perseverance is tested. Put in a lot of situations where she's lost and alone and facing a winter storm and facing, threats in the wilderness, and she has to fight through many things and betrayals and just the treatment that the natives received. And she ends up on a plantation in servitude, and her grandmother was a shaman and taught her the healing arts, and she finds herself in the middle of the darkest time of our history, the Civil War, and she encounters a Union soldier who she falls in love with. So there's a forbidden love story there. But she's a very heroic character and told in a very realistic way and through her eyes. And the book is getting a lot of praise for that reason alone, just to be told, from that perspective. And also I have a lot of women who say, I can't believe that you could write, a story, through the eyes of a woman.
Well, that is pretty awesome that you're able to do that. Now, in your research, they weren't necessarily complaining about the Indians and the Redskins. I mean, these name change things sort of deflect from the real story that is affecting Native Americans, is it not?
Yeah. I don't get into that too much because that's a lot of that stuff. I don't fully understand. I mean, I'm Irish. I don't take offense at the Notre Dame, fighting Irish. So I don't know. On that situation, I think some of that. I think we get too extreme these days on so many levels, and focus on things that aren't as important as these other things over here that are more important that should be focused upon. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know the man that designed the logo for the Washington Redskins was Native American. So that's now been taken away from him. So, it's just a matter of opinion. Wherever your stance is. My personal stance is I think there's more important things to focus on in society and even the Native American community as to their issues more than a logo or or a brand of pancake syrup or something. I just think we get way too sensitive on some of these things and overthink them a little bit.
Kevin, does it frustrate you that you're working hard to tell the story and yet even the main, just even regular people will just focus on the other stuff, and then they say it's for the benefit of the Native Americans, but they don't do anything for them. I mean, I feel like you're doing more by writing about the issues of that time for them than those who are activists, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, and there might be some truth in that statement, Alex. I mean, because, like I said, a lot of people have a lot of talk and no action, and that's what so many politicians do. They're talking a good story, but what are you actually doing, for these communities? I had a young man reach out to me who was Mohawk and who had read the book, and he which is something I was looking for. I really was hoping for some readers, from that community, particularly the Haudenosaunee communities of the Mohawk and the Oneida and Seneca and so forth. And he goes, you wrote a really good story true to, these people. The people, my grandmother was referred to as a Mingo, which is part of the title in back in those days. And a Mingo they weren't a tribe, but they were kind of an independent member of the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois nation. And he read that. He goes, you were very true, and you did your research and about these great people. And then he suggested, some other people who settled in the Ohio River Valley to maybe write a book about. So he was very honored by that and said that my ancestors would be honored by that. So that meant a lot to me, because it meant that it meant that I told the story true and honest and through the eyes of my character, who's my great grandmother, whose name is Kateri, her native name.
Well, let me ask you this, because you won Mother's Choice Award. How do you think that ended up happening? Congratulations! But what did they see in the book?
Thank you.
That resonated?
Yeah. Mother's Choice. The Mother's Choice Awards is a really. I was really having my fingers crossed on this one, because they review all kinds of products. They review children's toys. Yeah, can you hear me? Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, the Mother's Choice Awards is really an interesting award, because they review so many products. They review children's products, they review clothes, they review all this stuff to give their approval, and also books, novels, and children's books. So yeah, I mean, when I received the gold, which is their top award for a novel, I was thrilled. I was just over the moon with that. So, I mean, that tells me, once again, it's more validation that the story was good. The story is a good story for children and teens and families, for anybody, for that matter. So that meant a lot to me. The book also won an honorable mention in the New England Book Festival for Best General Fiction. So it's doing well. It's entered into some other awards. It just won a Reader's Favorite 5-star. And I'm just waiting to hear back on some other LA Book Festival and the San Francisco Book Festival and the Paris. So it's entered into several others, and I'm waiting to hear back. I've got some really good reviews, from some folks. I actually asked a lady named Dreama Denver, who is the widow of TV icon Gilligan's Island star Bob Denver. She read the book for me, and she she said she couldn't put it down. I mean, her review reads, from the first page to the last, I was drawn into a world populated by characters who stole my heart, living a story that kept me on the edge of my seat. And, I've got just tons and tons of reviews like that and comments like that. So I know the book's done well. And my biggest critic is my wife, who's my critique partner. She loved Heart of Steel, but she said this book was her obsession. This is her kind of story. And I couldn't write the chapters fast enough for her because she was reading them as I was writing them.
Well, let me ask, where can we find the book, and how can people find you?
To go to my website is authorkevinmiller.com. That's authorkevinmiller.com. The book's also available on Amazon. It's also available at Headline Books. That's the publisher of White Skies, Black Mingo. But the easiest way, I've got all the links off my website at authorkevinmiller.com.
And one last thing, because I want to bring you back on, but I like keeping these episodes a little shorter. I definitely want to have back on and talk about this more as the vaccination process actually goes in these communities. Maybe you can have some thoughts on that as well. But do you yourself have any plans to visit your great-grandmother's tribe, the reservations? Like, do you have any plans to visit that community, since you are part of it through your great-grandmother?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've got several trips planned. I've got a trip planned in October. We're doing a book signing at the big convention center in West Virginia and around Charleston. And I'm definitely going to be taking a trip. I'm going to go to Wheeling and find my great-great-grandmother's grave and my great-great-grandfather's grave and do some video documentation, little documentaries and stuff to share, on my website. And I just want to tour the area and tour West Virginia. I was born in Ohio, and I have so many relatives living in West Virginia, and my dad was born there, and I just West Virginia as well. So yeah, I have lots of plans on doing that. At the same time, I'll go to Ohio and I'll walk the property of my great grandfather's and my grandfather's farm in Heart of Steel. Yeah, I got a lot of plans doing that. I was going to fly back this coming month, but I just couldn't make it happen because I had some conflicting schedules and participate in an event going back there. But I'm definitely going to be there looking around and get involved, go to Mingo Country, Mingo County, and do some research and talk to some folks and interview some people and just see what else I can do to help this community, this great nation. They're the Haudenosaunee. We refer to them as Iroquois, which is an English word. The English refer to them. It's a French word actually, and they don't really like that word because they're the Haudenosaunee nation. So I learned a lot. I learned an awful lot about their culture and their religion and their beliefs and their perspective. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for these great people.
Well, and it shows. And I got to ask on another podcast the range. We talk about the southern reservations. I'm sure there's still some in the Northeast, or is that pretty much? Have they all pretty much moved down south, or how many in the Northeast would you say there are right now that maybe people don't know?
There's Native Americans are spread out all across America. I mean, in Arizona, where I'm from, and we have many tribes: Navajo and Apache and Zuni, and just there's so many different tribes. And my wife actually, she's Mexican American, but she has about 45% Native blood in her. After doing her DNA testing as well. But no, the Native American, they're all over the nation. There's reservations everywhere, across the country. So I don't really know the numbers, how they pan out, but I think they would probably distribute pretty evenly across the country.
Well, there you have it. Kevin D. Miller, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll have you back soon enough.
Oh, thanks, Scott. I always love talking to you.
Thank you, sir.
Talk to you next time.
Talk to you next time. I'm Alex Garrett, where, of course, we're always adapting. Stay tuned.